The types of proper protective equipment, or PPE, should be selected based on the types of exposure you are faced with. If contact with or splatter from potentially infectious materials is reasonably anticipated, the PPE should be worn on the areas of your body that are potentially exposed. It is especially important to cover mucous membranes, skin abrasions or cuts, and your hands. Proper protective equipment should include gloves, mouth and eye protection, gowns, aprons, lab coats, caps, shoe covers, resuscitation barriers, CPR masks. Disposable PPE should be properly discarded after use. Other forms of contaminated PPE may be reused after proper decontamination. Your employer is responsible, with no charge to the employee, to provide the proper protective equipment necessary for emergency situations. However, it is the employee's responsibility to wear it properly and maintain it in proper condition. It is also up to the employee to request any and all replacement items when PPE becomes damaged or unusable. Be sure to consult with your supervisor for the location of its PPE at your company. It's also important to remember that PPE does have limitations. It must be properly worn, maintained, and discarded and replaced if damaged. Engineering and work practice controls are mechanical devices and procedures that are designed to reduce the likelihood of an exposure incident set up by your employer. These controls have limitations as well and should be used in conjunction with other methods to prevent exposure. These work practice controls can vary from company to company, but may include hand washing. Hand washing areas should be set up with proper antiseptic hand cleaner and paper towels. Biohazard signs and labels and containers should be used to properly identify contaminated waste. Containers should be closable, constructed to contain all contents and prevent leakage. They should also be properly labeled or color-coded and closed prior to removal to prevent spillage or protrusion of contents during handling. The proper color for biological contaminated waste is red or red-orange bags and fluorescent orange labeled containers. These containers need to be disposed of properly through your supervisor or an area hospital. Contaminated laundry must be handled as little as possible. It should be transported in appropriately labeled containers and must be properly cleaned. The Needle Stick Safety and Prevention Act requires the use of safer needles, needleless systems, and sharps disposal containers. Policies, procedures, and needle stick devices are required to be reevaluated for effectiveness each year. Employees should never break, bend, recap, or remove needles. In addition to needles, any sharp object, such as broken glass, should only be picked up by mechanical means, such as a broom and dustpan, and should be disposed of properly. Activity in and around areas of possible bloodborne exposure needs to be limited. This includes no eating, drinking, smoking, application of cosmetics, or the handling of contact lenses in these potentially exposed areas. An exposure incident is when blood or other potentially infectious materials make contact with eyes, mouth, other mucous membranes, non-intact skin or open sore, or by piercing the skin. Stop and limit exposure to yourself and others. Immediately and thoroughly wash any exposed area of skin with antiseptic soap and water. Flush your eyes, nose, or mouth with water if blood or any body fluid comes into contact with these areas. Report the incident to your supervisor or appropriate management personnel. The area in which the incident occurred will need to be properly cleaned up. If this is not your responsibility, then be sure that the proper persons are notified of the area needed to be cleaned. Your company should provide the proper BBP cleanup materials. They may choose to use a low-cost BBP cleanup kit that provides all items necessary for the proper cleaning of an exposure incident, as well as properly protect the employees cleaning the area. The steps for cleanup are: contain the spill using absorbent materials, remove used absorbent materials, disinfect the area with germicide or a 10% bleach solution, dispose of contaminated materials into properly marked containers, discard and decontaminate PPE. An incident report needs to be completed that describes the incident, including the routes of exposure and the identity of the source individual, if known. As a result of the exposure incident, you should have your blood tested for diseases. The test results should be discussed with you and appropriate treatment administered if needed. The source individual or individual's blood may also be collected and tested if consent is received. At this time, you will have the opportunity to receive the HBV vaccination if you had previously declined it. All associated expenses are to be paid by the employer, and employees have the right to complete confidentiality of all results and treatments. Remember, blood-borne pathogens are serious hazards to your health. To ensure safety, don't take chances. Be aware of potential hazards and use safe work practices. Your risk of exposure can be greatly reduced by remembering and practicing the information presented in this program.